Blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy.
And you know, when we take the right steps, we can see healing.
These are blessings on people that have positioned themselves to receive the ugly Beatitudes.
Hello, folks. We're back looking at our series. We've been in the Beatitudes that have been very challenging. This week, we're going to be looking at ugly meekness. And I think that it's one of the most challenging topics for me. You know, as Pastor Jamie shared with us, he talked about being poor in spirit. He talked about mourning and being comforted and the promises that God brings to us in those places and positioning ourselves. And you know, ugly meekness is a place where we can also position ourselves. It actually builds as we look at the foundational pieces of being able to acknowledge our inabilities before the Lord and our poverty of spirit and letting Him fill those places and letting Him comfort us in those times of grief and mourning and the promises that come with that. Ugly meekness is a place that we get to show or work out those things in our life. Jesus says to us that learn of me, for I am lowly, I am humble. In other words, He's gentle. And so He's our example of how to be meek. In and of ourselves, we can't be meek people. We don't have the ability. Now, I know some people that I've talked to over the years that know me, talk to me, look at me or whatever, see me in life, and they say, oh, you know, she's so meek or quiet and shy. And though, no, I am not a meek person. There is nothing in my personality that is meek. I am shy, I might be quiet, I might be reserved or conscientious about things, and that's my personality. But meekness is something that comes far more deeply within and is only provided by Jesus. And so I've had to learn, and I've been on this learning curve, and I'd love to tell you after close to 40 years of walking with God that I've got this down, but I don't. And we're in process, we'll always be in process, and God will be always challenging us in this. Why? Because He loves us, and He wants us to be like Him. You know, I think about the term meekness, and as I've tried to wrap my brain around it a little bit, I think about my brother's farm in South Carolina, and I love to go there. I love to visit there. Horses are my thing. If I could be left to myself and do anything I wanted to do, it'd be a horse farm with a lot of horses. But that's not my calling. I get to live vicariously through my brother and sister-in-law, Rena. And they have about 6, 7 horses. She raises gypsy vanners. They are beautiful. They're a lot like a Clydesdale. They're big, white. I mean, when they come running to the barn to eat, you better get out of the way. The strength that those horses carry are phenomenal. You just see the creation of God when He made these powerful beings. And you know, it's a lot like that with us. We have strength, all of us. We may show it in different ways, but we have our own sense of strength, our own sense of power. And I've watched these horses, and I've watched my brother and Rena work with what they call a horse whisperer, a trainer. And they have implemented these skills with these horses, and I've watched them take them when they wouldn't do a darn thing they're supposed to do, stubborn. They couldn't get them to do a thing. And you take something that big and try to move it, it's like moving a tractor. It's not going to do anything you want it to do. But as they've been patient and worked with them and trained them, the horses have learned where they find their most peace and their joy, and that's in being obedient to their masters. And so what's been beautiful in the process of Libby and Grace are their names, the 2 major ones. They have learned that it's a beautiful thing to follow. And as they follow their leaders, they don't even have to put a bit in their mouth. They don't even have to put a saddle on them. They can get on those horses and they are rideable. These horses she just takes her knee and barely applies pressure, and that horse goes the direction she's supposed. They take the hair and the mane and move it this way. They have learned to be in sync, in tune with their masters. And it makes for a beautiful ride and an enjoyable ride for both the master and the beast. And it's a little bit like that with us. God has to tame us, and we have to allow him to speak to us and teach us how to be meek as he is, how to take that inner strength that we have and yield it. I love the stories about Moses. Many of you know about Moses in the Old Testament, the great leader of God. Moses was he was called one of the meekest guys in the Bible. And we think of that as being, weak. Moses was anything but weak. Moses was a strong guy. He may have been a quiet guy. He may have even been a timid guy, but he was powerful and strong in his own strength. And Moses exemplified that when God began to deal with his heart and he wanted to bring the Egyptians out and rescue his people. He tried to do it in his own strength. And when he did, that led him to killing a man in anger. His own strength led him to violent anger, which ended up causing him to murder. And he fled, and he had to live in the desert, for 40 years, and it was testing and tribulation and trial. And this isn't a place, meekness, that we can learn overnight or easily. This is oftentimes going through the valleys and the tests and the tribulations of life, because meekness is exemplified of how we treat other people. And Moses had to learn how to love a whole nation of people that were very trying. And it was a difficult time for him, but he became a very strong leader. He didn't lose his own strength. He didn't become a weak-willed person. But what he learned to do was let his strength be controlled by Jesus, by God's Spirit. And it began to be used in the right way. And so when we think of meekness, we don't have to think of weakness. Meekness is something that, there's many different personalities. My dad, for instance, I grew up with a dad that was anything but meek. And my dad, I love him with all of my heart, but that was one strong dude, Rick Compton. You mess with Rick Compton. He had some, a little bit of anger issues. He had some, anybody that knew Rick, he was in gangs and motorcycle gangs in Massachusetts growing up, and sailor, and had the sailor mouth to go with it. And, so I grew up seeing my father's strength, but I oftentimes saw the wrong side of it, and I was on the wrong side of it. But I tell you what, when Jesus got a hold of my dad, there was a humility and a brokenness that came into his world. And I began to see my father become something that I'd never seen. I saw a man that became meek. This man exemplified a difference in his tongue, in his language, a difference in the very look in his eyes, a difference in what how he treated people, how he looked, how he treated his wife, how he treated me and my siblings, how he treated other people. I watched my dad respond and things that were before I knew he could take somebody out over what just happened. And I watched him work through meekness and a yieldedness to the Holy Spirit, yielded his strength to let God's glory be shown in his life. And it wasn't an easy task for him. I know it wasn't. I watched him die to his pride and his own strength. But you know what? It became visible to everybody. People come to Rick Compton now for marriage counseling. People come to Rick Compton for prayer for healing. People come to Rick Compton for wisdom. My husband, since he lost his father, my dad has become a dad to him. And the respect and love, my dad can't even talk about Jesus without tearing up. It's like, who is this man? But that's what Jesus wants to do. He wants to take our raw strength and make us into an image of him. And so, my personality, I'm pretty passive aggressive. It took me a long time to figure that out. And I can, I try to be very calm, pleasing, accommodating. I want people to like me. I want to be thought of well. And I can find myself, the strength part of me, that when I've been, brought into a place where somebody's challenged me or hurt me or, done something wrong to me, or my pride can step in, and my pride and arrogance can begin to become strong. And I can be at that place with enough of this. And when that kicks in, my tool can be a defensive anger, and I can move into this, I'm ready to fight. I got a little Rick Compton in me. I got my own flesh, and I can move into fight mode and anger, and I'm the last thing I am is gracious. But that isn't the strength. And part of that is I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be dependent. I don't want somebody to walk on me. And so what I have to do is yield that place to Jesus. I have to be willing to walk through forgiveness and Christ's love and say, Lord, I want your will more than I want my will. I want you to be glorified. And I will tell you, it is not an easy place for me. And some of you maybe are not as passive aggressive. You may just have a lot of, strong ambition or aggressiveness, or you just have overconfidence, and you may have this thing that happened to you maybe even as a child. And maybe you were wounded and hurt and belittled, taken from all the time by others, siblings or other people or kids at school or whatever. And so you may have this strong thing of you're never going to back down. You're just going to be strong and tough and outpower, overtalk, And you know what? That can be another form of strength that has not been yielded, just like those horses. That Jesus wants to do so much more with you, but you don't have the trust and ability to let him take those places of your strength and yield it to him and let it become his strength. It doesn't mean you become weak. What it does is it means your strength is now being able to be used for God's glory. And so, I think about Mother Teresa. All of us would say that has to be the meekest woman on the face of the earth, gone to be with Jesus. But, that could be a real modern day role model of meekness. I would think that Mother Teresa may have been a very strong-willed woman, very strong-willed. And when you read, I've read a little bit of her testimony, not a lot in the past, but that woman had possibility of wealth and riches and a fine life. And it took so much strength for her to be able to lay down those things and go and do the things that Jesus required of her and that she wanted to do for the Lord Jesus. And so we see a woman with such meekness, but such strength to be able to touch bodies and heal and go into those dark places and lift people out of death and overcome her own weaknesses by allowing God's strength to rule and reign in her life. We have a promise from Jesus that we will inherit the land. Blessed are those that are meek, for they will inherit the land. As we look around, as we look at the map behind us and we just see the land, and when God's kingdom comes and we understand the kingdom is here, it's the now and the not yet, but it's the now, and we understand that we're inheriting the land, there'll come a day we know we'll rule with Jesus. We'll have the land, and he has the keys. But that promise isn't just for the future. That is a now promise. You can inherit the land now. And when I think about meekness and the land I'm inheriting now, does it mean I'm going to go get a piece of property? God may give me that, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about your spiritual land. When you follow God into these places, be ye Humble, be ye meek, gentle, gracious as I am. When you take that land, which is your spiritual territory, when you claim that and you walk in that, there are blessings that you will receive now. You will receive blessings in your marriage, with your wife, with your husband. You will receive them in your relationships as a single. You will receive them as a teenager with your parents. As children, you will receive those blessings as you walk in them. The favor of the Lord. The Lord loves to bless us. Sometimes we stymie those blessings because we have our own way and our own strong will and our lack of yieldedness. But if we want the blessings of God, it's going to be painful and difficult, but the joy that comes from these blessings of the Lord are so worth it. You know, I want us to position ourselves, and as a church, position ourselves and be able to be rideable, just like those horses with my brother and Rena. Are you rideable? Are you rideable in your own life from Jesus? Can he whisper to you? Can you yield to him when you need to? How about just, simply in traffic during the there's times, I'm as human as anybody else. People do wrong things. You want to say bad things or give gestures or what, but we're always exemplifying Jesus and his love. People are watching us. This is the one beatitude that people can see visibly in our life. We look at Jesus, we look at Mother Teresa, but are you being looked at? And that does not mean that you have to be some mealy-mouthed doormat. God's not saying that. But what he is saying is that he wants to, it's the one place it said, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. They will inherit his righteousness. And so as you're inheriting this place of being able to let Jesus' glory shine through you, let's look at this new year as a church. And can Jesus ride us into the places he wants to? Are we able corporately to let him do that in our lives and individually receive those blessings? He has the promise for you now. It's yours. And all you have to do is yield. And that's a good thing. And let your strengths be magnified through his glory. Let him do with you what he can do best through you.